Good morning, sports fans. You're listening to 96.9 FM WHYR-LP Baton Rouge Community Radio.
This is Eric Hatfield along with Coach Perry Daniels, and we are here to bring you the latest, the greatest, the best, and the most entertaining in high school, college, and professional sports. You are listening to Louisiana All American Sports. And if that wasn't a big cue, guess what? It is football season, and football's in the air, and football is back, and we are here on Louisiana All American Sports on 96.9 FM WHYR-LP Baton Rouge Community Radio. I am Eric Hatfield.
And I'm Terrell Johnson.
And Coach Perry Daniels will be joining us momentarily, but we are ready for a pigskin, gridiron, classic version of Louisiana All American Sports. So, of course, we have everything kicking up this week. The NFL preseason concluded on Thursday night. High school jamborees started kicking up last night. And, of course, college football also got underway on Thursday night. And we're here to bring it all to you today on Louisiana All-American Sports. So we're going to patch in the professor, Terrell Johnson, with a little high school teasing, a little high school warm-up.
Indeed. We will share with you today some of the local high school jamborees, as I know that all of the local football addicts can now receive their fix. Wow. At Olympia Stadium, you had Northeast defeating Tara 8-6. University High played my alma mater, McKinley Senior High School. We came out on the short end of the stick on that one, 21-7. Plaquemine defeated White Castle in the Plaquemine Jamboree. Santa Ma upended East Ascension, 21-14. Catholic High manhandled St. Michael's 30-7. Central also looked strong as ever. They defeated Baker 21-0. Zachary manhandled East Feliciana as well. And Scotlandville opened the proverbial can of you-know-what on Capital 43-0. And the quarterbacks at Capital, Levi Lewis, passed for 95 yards and 2 touchdowns, 6 of 11 passing. And he looks phenomenal. And he looks like as if he's on his way to an all-state season.
That's good old-fashioned, passionate butt-kicking, getting your shoes, coat, and your hat tooken. And then don't forget, next week we mentioned high school football. We mentioned Scotlandville underway. Well, of course, I'm always surrounded by McKinley folks. So
Yes,
we have McKinley High School, and that's their alma mater in the background. Hail, hail. Going up against Scotlandville next week. That's going to be a big game. If I remember correctly, that should be from Memorial Stadium. So get ready as high school, the real deals, not the jamborees, not the scrimmages, the real McCoy, the pep rallies, the cheerleaders, and 4 quarters of football will be getting underway next Friday here in the capital city.
Sir.
So we have a whole lot of shaking going on today. Of course, we have, before we're going to talk about a lot of college football because those are the live bullets that are flying. But we really should mention a couple of notes in the National Football League real quick. Of course, the Saints concluded their preseason with not a whole lot going on there. They play Atlanta next week. Pretty much we're just looking at final cuts. Nothing dramatic expected for the Saints. But we wanted to update you on a story as it moved along. The NFL domestic violence policy has been rolled out. We talked about the story of Ray Rice where he was involved in an altercation with his then-fiancée, now wife, in Atlantic City. A video, of course, was out, went viral. There's a lot we don't know, but what we do know is it looked pretty bad, and then Ray Rice was suspended for 2 games. A lot of outcry came out afterwards that why is it only 2 games? It seems too lenient. He beat this girl up. It looks like the NFL is soft on domestic violence. It didn't look very good for the Shield. Well, excuse me. Well, Roger Goodell first stood behind his decision, but after he stood behind his decision, he kicked it down the hill and rolled out a policy that's a little more, I think, palatable to make sure that's Perry. A little more palatable for the public to accept, and so we have and Coach Perry Daniels is in the building, so we're going to get him on the air and pick it up in just a second. Coach, in the words of the Verizon guy, can you hear me now? All right, we got Coach Perry Daniels on the air live here on WHYR and Louisiana All American Sports. So we got the full trio in the building. We'll just patch you in. We're going to go ahead and we're going to continue our talk on. We're talking about the NFL domestic violence policy and getting folks cued in on that. So. Anyway, Roger Goodell rolled out his something I think is going to be a lot more palatable for those who were criticizing him earlier. It's basically a 2-tier process, and you're looking at a minimum of 6 weeks, anywhere up to a lifetime ban for an incidence of domestic violence. The first offense is a minimum of a 6-week suspension, could be 6 weeks or more. The second offense, you are suspended indefinitely from the league. That's the player is suspended indefinitely from the league for a violation. The player may apply for reinstatement after a year, but it could, in theory, be up to a lifetime ban, depending on the seriousness of the situation. Now, unlike a lot of personal conduct, this is under the personal conduct policy. Unlike a lot of personal conduct policy punishments, this one is triggered by adjudication. That means either a conviction or a plea deal. So just the simple accusation, just the act of having somebody accused of domestic violence is not necessarily going to, get them in hot water, unlike a lot of players. If they get pulled over for DUI or pulled over for possession of marijuana, they might get their hands slapped. But this is triggered by the adjudication. It is not retroactive, so everyone, including Ray Rice, comes in with a fresh start. So, Perry, T, y'all want to jump in on this a little bit? Get some of this domestic violence policy action?
Coach Dan?
Yeah, man. It's good to see the NFL recognize that they had an error here and are willing to make an adjustment. And, it's not very often that you see Roger Goodell apologize for anything. And for him to come out and apologize for this shows the power that the people actually have. And, I have a saying that, if the people will lead, the leaders will follow. And this is a perfect example of that type of situation.
I concur. And it's one of those things where, the NFL is so big that they have to, their entire existence is based on its relationship with the public, with the media, with its fans. I think the Ray Rice situation, it was a bad look, to put, as the young people would say. It's a bad look, to put it mildly. And I think, look, kudos to Goodell in the league. I've often said, really in any environment of customer service, I'm not going to hold it against you indefinitely if there's a problem. I want to know how you fix that problem. And I think this is a much more responsive, this is much more in tune, I think, with what we expect and should accept from the National Football League as far as its discipline on something as serious as domestic violence. So, speaking of domestic violence and speaking of the NFL and crime and the NFL's personal conduct penalties and punishment, Josh Gordon, Cleveland Browns wide receiver, it's interesting. It really ties into the story well because often the Ray Rice story, or Ray Rice was only suspended for 2 games, was compared and contrasted to Josh Gordon, the Browns wide receiver who was a repeat offender under the league's substance abuse policy. He tested positive for marijuana and was suspended for a year. Of course, this came out around the same time as the Ray Rice decision, and the narrative was Ray Rice only gets 2 games for beating up his wife, but here it is, Josh Gordon smoked a little pot, and he's getting the hammer brought to him for a year. Naturally, it was already written in the collective bargaining agreement, but Josh Gordon appealed the decision. There is some background behind this. Josh Gordon had 2 samples taken, pursuant to the league's substance abuse policy. He had 2 samples tested. The levels of marijuana in his system were not consistent in both samples. One was barely over the league's threshold that constitutes a positive test. The other was below the threshold. Josh Gordon said it was secondhand smoke, which of course is not voluntarily, toking up and getting high. He appealed the decision. The NFL pretty much said, no way, you're still going to serve the year suspension. It's now been speculated that he and his attorney are probably going to go to court to try to get some injunctive relief using the argument about the 2 inconsistent samples and one being below the threshold. The problem for Josh Gordon is, very shortly after the news broke on his suspension, he was arrested for DUI. He's a multi-time offender. He got busted for this in college. It's just something or another with this talented but disturbed young man. So, guys, I don't know what to think on this.
Well, I think that Josh Gordon has a leg to stand on as far as the indecision or indecisiveness with the 2 tests, the 2 samples. I think it very well should be appealed. As far as his track record or his body of work, the jury is still out. The verdict is still out on that. I think he has some personal character defects that we all have.
Right.
However, he does have a valid point with the indiscrepancies with the samples.
I agree. Perry?
I think they're taking the wrong thing to court. I understand where they're trying to go with that. To me, the bigger issue is how can the NFL and its ownership cartel deny this man from earning a living? So if you're going to suspend him for a year, he has tried to take his talent outside of the National Football League.
Correct.
And go to Canada. And now the Cleveland Browns are saying, no, we're not going to allow you to do that. That, to me, seems like the court case. That to me, you should, if the NFL is going to deny you, you should be able to take your talent and earn a living elsewhere.
Well, that's an interesting point that you raise. There are 2 prongs to that. He can't. I mean, there's nothing physically to stop him from going north of the border, but there is language in the contract. If he gets banged up in the CFL, that under a standard NFL contract is considered a non-football injury. Although ironically, it's while playing football. But You understand, it's not in the course of his duties or obligations to the Cleveland Browns. They can void his contract and come after him for a signing bonus. So there are some previously agreed upon terms in black and white with which the Cleveland Browns aren't just pulling this out of thin air. They're not saying
no. I totally get that, but even outside of the NFL, there have been situations in professional life where people who have to sign these non-compete agreements that they have been voided,
right?
Because the non-compete agreement is preventing the person from earning a living. So just because it's in black and white doesn't necessarily mean that the court can't overturn what has been previously agreed upon.
That's an excellent point, Perry. And non-compete agreements, we're kind of segueing a little bit, but hey, sports are often a microcosm of life, as we say so many times in this show. But I'll tell you that it's one of those things that's always fascinated me is labor law. And I've seen cases where non-compete agreements are thrown out by the court. What ultimately the judge has to do is decide basically the validity and the interest and the legitimacy of the non-compete agreement. For example, you say you have somebody this actually was a real case back in the mid-'90s. A young woman was working in the French Quarter at a daiquiri shop, and they had her sign a non-compete agreement. Well, it's basically a minimum wage job plus tips. She went to, I think, a competitor literally down the street. The employer, the daiquiri shop, tried to get injunctive relief. The judge threw the entire non-compete agreement out, saying basically, and you lawyers out there can help us, 225-343-9927, 225-343-9927, but that there was no compelling interest. That, in so many words, it's saying there's no interest in the employer. This is a minimum wage employee with no proprietary secret. She pours daiquiris. Sorry, bye, no compete agreement for you. On the other hand, there was a case only a couple of years later. I forget the details, but let's say, for instance, Perry, you and I start something up. We both sign non-compete agreements with one another, let's say for a year, and we have this really awesome idea, and we start making some money, and there's some really proprietary original trade secrets you and I came up with. The court could, and again, it's hard to predict, it depends on the judge, but the court could say there is a compelling interest. You know, you two owners came up with this together, and by competing immediately, you're hurting him, and you all agreed not to. It's in place. So it really depends on the compelling interest. You know, I'm thinking the Browns would argue we have a lot of money invested in this young man, and like you said, Josh Gordon's argument is I need to make some money.
Right. But he's not playing for anyone else in the NFL, so, you know, just to me, it seems like there should be a case to allow this man to earn a living. This is what he does for a living.
I agree with you. You know, it'll be interesting. I never thought about this until a few minutes ago, because I was thinking about the inconsistent testing samples, Perry, but I think you're right. I think his lawyer ought to bring it up, and you know, I'm sure that the guy he's hiring didn't just roll out of law school. He probably will bring it up. That is going to be really interesting to see as it develops. I'll tell you. And that's interesting, Perry. We gotta freeze that and bring that back for I told you so, because you never know, man. That might work.
Absolutely.
So that will wrap up the National Football League talk here. Perry, do you want to go to break, or do you want to go into the gridiron action?
Let's go to break and communicate.
All right, so we're going to be back probably in about 60 seconds on 96.9 FM, WHYR-LP, Baton Rouge Community Radio. It is high school football season. We have a lot of McKinley people in the building, and Louisiana All American Sports has a special relationship with McKinley High School. So in the break, please enjoy the following. All right, so we have, of course, it's football time, football season, and that will move us on the bluff. Or actually, will not move us on the bluff. It'll move us to the school on the bluff, but we'll be moving a few miles to the west out to Cajun country as the Southern University Jaguars go out to face, University of Louisiana Lafayette. Nice interstate rivalry. This should be a very interesting competitive game. ULL is one of the better mid-major schools in college football, and Southern University, the defending SWAC champions, getting ready to defend that title and going to try to tune those boys up to the west.
Yes, sir. I'm very interested in seeing how Dante Sharts will fare today. He's the starting quarterback for the Jaguars. However, he isn't expected to be the only signal caller. True freshman Austin Howard of St. John will also play.
Yeah, man. Unfortunately, I'm not quite sure how competitive this football game is going to be. There were 3 conference champions in the state of Louisiana last year, and these 2 teams were 2 of the 3. Southeastern University was the third. Was the third conference champion out of the state of Louisiana. And, you know, you've got Capitol High quarterback Broadway back underneath the center for the Raging Cajuns.
Yeah.
Right, and that young man can play some ball. I like him.
And he has a rifle arm.
He is fun to watch. It's Terrence Broadway. That's his name,
Terrence
right?
Broadway.
Yeah, I like him.
Broadway.
He's fun.
And he's going up against his old high school coach, Chad Germany,
right,
who is the offensive coordinator for the Jaguars. So, hey, guys, the Fixer's calling in now. I've got to answer that and get him queued up.
Okay. All right, that sounds like a game plan, and I'll get the Fixer queued up. And for you regular listeners of the show, if you like a little Nelly and you like a little St. Louis, you already know what's coming. That's a hint. I just love hearing that bump music come in. We haven't heard from the Fixer in a while, and I'm looking forward to it. He always adds the Fixer, for those of you that don't know, while Coach Daniels is patching him in, he is a friend of the show, a correspondent from Las Vegas. He and Perry go way back to their days in St. Louis growing up together. And the Fixer, G-Man, he works in Vegas. You know, he does the sports booking deal, which is perfectly legit there, and gives us the odds. And sometimes he has an invisible. You hear about the invisible hand of the market in the financial world. Sometimes in the sports world, there's an invisible hand of the fixer. I mean, let's go back to the World Cup with Brazil getting blown to smithereens by Germany by something that looked like an NFL score. Fixer kind of said he went out the night before with the goalkeeper. I don't know. It looked a little funny to me. So we have the Fixer coming up any moment as soon as Perry gets back on the line with us. And meanwhile, by the way, that Southern University at University of Louisiana Lafayette game will be at 6 o'clock p.m. on ESPN3. That's ESPN3. So, do we have the Fixer on the line, Perry?
The Fixer is ready.
All right, so you know what that means when you hear this, folks.
I'm going down your street in the rain. Come on. Ready to let it go.
Hey, what's happening? What's going on this morning, brother? Hey, man, it feels like I hadn't talked to you in over a year, man. It's been a long time.
No, man, you're a stranger.
Every once in a while, I have to lay low. You know, the alphabet looking for me, and you know, I just hide out. You know, I have to look at the trash can like on Sesame Street. I hear you, man. So we're kicking off the college football season this year, man. So give us the odds on who's favorite to win it all. And then there are some real important games of local interest. If you could just kind of tell us the lines on those games. Well, I'm going to start at the, I can't really start at the bottom. The list is too long, but we'll start here. Florida State is favored to win the 2015 National Championship at 4-1. Alabama, 5-1. Oregon, 15-2. Auburn, 10-1. Oklahoma, 10-1. UCLA, 10-1. Now for you LSU fans, 22-1.
That's not bad. I mean, really, shoot, it's better than the U.S. World Cup odds.
Let's put it to you this way: it's better than Boston College.
Right.
500.
Ooh. Matt Ryan's not walking through that door anytime soon.
Matt Ryan is far removed.
Yeah.
All right. So what about today's games, man? What do you have for us? Well. For LSU is favored by 6 points tonight. And for you Southern University Jaguar fans, they are giving you 38.5.
Ooh.
Ouch.
Ooh, wow.
Ouch.
Wow. I think I'd still put my money on Southern for 38 points.
Oh, that's
I mean,
wow.
All right.
Okay. Do you have anything else for us, Fixer? No, not much going on out here in Vegas right now. Everybody's getting ready. Football's coming, and baseball's ending, and it's starting to get busy. Money's starting to fly around. You know how we do it. I know how y'all do it, man. I tell you what, but we'll talk to you next week. Do me a favor, man. Make your way on down to Lafayette and see if you can help out those Jaguars. All right, man. You know maybe they need to give Lacumba the ball. Hey, man, you know the routine, man. Stay off the grid.
Stay out of jail.
Indeed.
That is the Fixer.
And Perry, oddly enough, I was looking through the papers earlier.
That's okay. My bad, I went over the professor. Go ahead, man.
No, I was saying, oddly enough, Southern University will be receiving $250,000 for their efforts today in competing against UL.
Hey.
It's a give and take situation. Hopefully, I mean, you know, we're not the typical pansy, the first game opener that these people usually pick.
For 250 G's, the ULL football team can whip my behind for 4 quarters.
You know what? But this is a really. I'm glad you brought that up, Professor, because you know it's a business, and this is a good regional game, and there's not a lot of travel expense involved. The Jaguar fans are going to pack
right
that stadium. ULL is looking to have its largest attendance in over 8 years
Right.
today.
Everybody wins.
Right. So it's good all around. Southern has an opportunity to progress their program by playing such a high caliber opponent.
That's right.
So it's just a good situation. And who knows? You never know. If it would have been last year's team, I would have felt a little better about the situation.
Right.
Dante Short's playing his very first college football game. That's just a tall task to ask of that young man and of the Jaguars.
Now, Perry, he still has Lee Dawson, Mike Jones on the team, right? Those guys were not seniors, were they?
I think Lee Dawson has moved on.
You're right. So you're right.
It's a young team now. He does have the McKinley High graduate Leo Tillery in the backfield.
Right.
And that's going to help him.
Mike
but
Jones.
We'll see.
Man, this is going to be a far from tall test. This is going to be a tremendous test for Dante Short coming in, facing the crowds, also with the addition of inclement weather.
Right.
Today.
It does favor the running game, though, and take the ball out of his inexperienced hands more.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a good look today, as Eric said, as the youth would say. However, we'll have to see.
Well, look, there's always... Go ahead.
I call him Leo Tillery, but his name is Leonard Tillery.
Okay.
So go ahead, Eric.
Well, I was going to say, there's always some kind of hope. If you remember a few years ago, back in, I want to say it was 2007, when Appalachian State went to play the Michigan Wolverines, and that was about a 30-some-odd point spread, and App State pulled off the Mammoth Upstate. App State was a normal FCS contender and champion, and just like Southern won their conference. So, hey, you never know. They might put up a fight there with Ooh-La-La. We'll see. That's why, as Chris Berman says, that's why they play the games.
That's why they play the game.
Yes, sir.
So,
across town, man, there's a big game.
Yeah, so moving to the school that's located a little bit south down 110 and then on to I-10. We have the Fighting Tigers of LSU for the third time, actually for the fourth time in the last 5 years, if I recall. The LSU Tigers will be opening up in a neutral site on national television. This year they will travel 4 hours to the west to Houston, Texas, to play the Wisconsin Badgers out of the Big Ten, which of course has 12 teams. Not really figuring that out yet. But this is going to be an interesting game. Now, the Fixer said it was about a 6-point spread. That's going to be interesting. The Badgers are ranked number 14 going into this game. LSU number 13. On paper, this looks very even. I think, obviously I'm a little biased. You all know I went to LSU. I bleed purple and gold. I got full LSU gear on right now. But I will say this much. LSU's got a stable of horses in its backfield, as it does every year, and that stable is ready to run. Now, Wisconsin has a bad mamma jamma themselves, so I don't want to downplay them. Melvin Gordon ran for 1,600 yards last year, averaged almost 8 yards a carry. However, Wisconsin does have a new quarterback, Tanner McVoy, who played Tanner McAvoy, who played safety last year, was moved over to quarterback, and he's actually going to unseed the starting quarterback for Wisconsin last year, Joel Stave, who kind of collapsed in the last couple of games last year at Wisconsin. These are two teams that run the ball. Perry, it wouldn't surprise me if there were over 60 carries between these two teams in this game.
No, neither Eric. I think that, especially with Jennings playing his first game as a starter for the Tigers, or we're going to see Brandon White as well, from some media reports. So I see the Tigers running the ball a lot.
Right. And Anthony, go ahead.
On paper, this game looks to be close, Eric, but I wouldn't be surprised if LSU runs away with this game. And this is why I'm thinking that. Wisconsin's tailor-made for LSU.
Right.
LSU's weakness on defense is their secondary.
Correct.
And Wisconsin's not going to exploit that at all.
Right. I agree.
So, I think we could possibly see. I think LSU and the 6 points is a safe bet.
Yeah, I think that's about in the ballpark, and I do agree. It's kind of like with the TCU game where the spread was close, but there was a potential for a runaway, and that's kind of what happened. It was very close for two and a half quarters, and then it got out of hand. That could happen. Wisconsin's having to travel much farther than LSU. It's going to be a heavy LSU crowd with it being right there in Houston. There are a lot of LSU people in Houston living there, let alone folks that are going to travel just for the start of the season. So I do think some of those things, even though it's technically a neutral site, kind of tip the neutrality ever so just a little bit in the favor of the purple and gold. Perry did, of course, make the big announcement that surprises nobody, that Brandon Jennings is going to start. He has that experience from last year. He knows the offense a bit better. Brandon Harris, with true freshmen, I can only go by what I hear from the media because none of us are allowed to see them before they play. But I've heard he has looked really good in spring camp and in preseason camp, but I think Les Miles wanted to go with the experience, and Anthony Jennings' style is a little more conducive to running than passing. So I think that's probably going to fit, but Les Miles did say that Brandon Harris is going to play a little bit tonight, and I'll tell you, I heard the young man speak during media day and a couple of interviews, and I'll tell you what, I don't know how it's going to translate on the field, but I know when a head is screwed on right, that young man's head is screwed on very right, Perry, so I'm looking forward to seeing Mr. Harris get some snaps.
Perry, also, let me piggyback off Eric's statement about neutrality. As he said, the last 3 years they have played in neutral sites. 2010 they played in Atlanta, where they defeated North Carolina 30-24.
That's right.
In 2011 they played in Arlington, Texas, where they defeated Oregon 40-27, and again in Arlington the following year 37-27. This year in Houston, and in 2016 they will be competing against Wisconsin again in Green Bay. Perry.
Hey, Professor, I have a question for you. Growing up in South Baton Rouge, did you ever think that you would see the day where the LSU Tigers would not only have a starting quarterback at African American, but a backup behind him that's an African American?
Wow, man, that is a heavy question. Growing up in South Baton Rouge, honestly, for all practical purposes, I would have never thought that. I can remember when I was a youth hearing stories about Burt Jones. When we grew up contemporaneously, you and I were in the 80s. I remember Wickersham.
I remember Jeff Wickersham.
And all Wickersham and
he was a
Alan
Fisher, Tommy Hodson.
Tommy Hodson was a bad man.
Tommy Hodson, I remember LSU had that major upset against Florida, I think it was.
It was the Auburn, the earthquake games.
Okay, yeah.
Eddie Fuller.
Eddie Fuller. Yep. But for the most part, I never really thought that this day would come. I mean, it is 2014 now, but not at LSU. I mean, just from the environment and the culture, I wouldn't have thought that.
It is interesting because, I'm a little younger than y'all, but I remember Jeff Wickersham and Alan Richer and Tommy Hodson, who actually was one of my all-time favorites. Right. But I remember those guys, and they definitely, it's one of those things at the time where you saw that change was slow. In college, you saw a lot of African-American quarterbacks popping up, and that wave took a while to work south. You remember Clemson with Homer Jones, and they had a shot. I think they might have won the national title or were contending, but that was in the early 80s.
They did win one.
Yeah, I don't know if Jones was the quarterback, but he was around that time.
I think the refrigerator was on that team.
Oh my God! No, he was. He was on one of the later teams. That's right. So you had that guy, but then you started to see the trend, and I'll tell you, in the '90s, when Curly Holman, I'll give him his props. He did put Melvin Hill up there. He wasn't the greatest passer in the world, but he did do it. He did bench Jamie. Howard and put
Jamie Howard,
and put Melvin Hill in there. And then when Coach DiNardo came, that was when what I call the real wave, the real change happened, if you will. You saw him bench Jamie Howard at the end of the year, poor Jamie Howard, and put Herb Tyler in there. Herb Tyler was a solid player for the next 3 years. You had a little transition, and then you had Rohan Davey come in, and that was really the beginning of the golden age of LSU football with Rohan. You had Jamarcus Russell, who, while as terrible as he was as a pro, was an absolute monster as a college quarterback. 70% completion, just a cannon for an arm. So we've seen, it took it better late than never, as the expression goes. And LSU got on the horse. Once they did, they rolled the pony, and we've had some success.
And speaking of African American quarterbacks, let's talk about Texas A&M and South Carolina.
That is a perfect transition, Perry. Wow. Well, y'all know I'm a fan of Johnny football, but on Thursday night I was like, Johnny who? I think we can call this guy Kenny Pigskin, because first-year starting quarterback Kenny Hill looked very ready to replace Johnny Manziel on the field. There was a lot of speculation with he had number 21 Texas A&M against number 9 South Carolina. Steve Spurrier's defense has been tenacious. They have a tough running game. They are the odds-on favorites in the SEC East, and with the loss to A&M, it's now an open race. And quarterback Kenny Hill broke Johnny Manziel's single-game passing record, Texas A&M school record, passing record, with 511 yards. And, folks, that record was broken by the end of the third quarter. It was absolutely shattered. He looked really confident. He aired the ball out. He completed 44 of 60 passes. That's almost 75%. He looked really confident. And there was one commentator on the SEC network, a large African-American gentleman, former player, and I can't think of who it was. Might have been Booger McFarland, but he said it almost looked too easy for Kenny Hill. And the question is Hill going to be that good, or did Steve Spurrier get caught slipping post Jadeveon Clowney?
I think it may have been a little bit of both. That defense is sorely missing Jadeveon Clowney, and they were kind of exposed. I heard jokingly that Johnny Manziel called this other guy something football, and he didn't take to that too kindly.
Oh, Kenny Pigskin. That's going until the media starts pushing something down our throats. I'm calling him Kenny's Pigskin. World, you heard it here first on Louisiana All American Sports. That is Kenny Pigskin till we hear otherwise. Perry?
Hey man, that Texas A&M team just looks really good, man, and they're going to compete for the title.
Hey, you got that guy. I mean, look, they're in the, I think they're going to be probably what I call fourth banana. You got, Alabama, Ole Miss looks really poised to break out this year. Of course, LSU will be around, but Texas A&M they showed by dismantling South Carolina the way they did that they are a real player. They are not a one-trick pony,
And to the old ball coach, hey, man, before you go criticizing the man, Nick Saban, get your team together.
Oh, yeah. So we mentioned this earlier on the show a couple of weeks ago during Media Day. Steve Spurrier, that's a Will Rogers never met a man that he didn't like, but he never met Steve Spurrier either, because Steve Spurrier gets up there and he's so he says, you have to love him and hate him at the same time. He says, Nick Saban has a really good recruiting class every year, and they're just very fortunate. They have the most talent every year. Every year they have the most talent. They've won 2 SEC championships. Well, the subtlety, the underlying message, you'd have to see the interview, but he's basically saying, hey, you got all that talent every year, and you've only won the SEC twice. What's wrong with you? And it caused a little hubbub, but old Spurrier got his.
Yeah, I love Spurrier. I love Spurrier's arrogance. Yeah. And at once upon a time, he had the monopoly at Florida.
Oh, God, those teams.
Florida had a monster during those years of, Emmett and all those guys when they were down there. Florida had a monster. Man.
Oh man, yeah, I used to circle Florida as a loss on the calendar. I just knew it was going to be bad. I knew it was going to be ugly.
Hey, Terry.
Yes, sir.
Let's get that other break in and go from there.
Okay, real quick, just to wrap up college football, we have Clemson at first of all, the LSU game will be at 8 p.m. on ESPN. I think we mentioned the Southern game, 6 o'clock on ESPN3, and also another big game, Clemson versus Georgia. Georgia has a good chance to maybe step into the front-runner's seat against South Carolina. That game will be at 4:30 on ESPN. Clemson and Georgia always have really, really dramatic, exciting slugfests. So we'll see you back in about 90 seconds on Louisiana All American Sports here on WHYR-LP, Baton Rouge Community Radio. We are back on 96.9 FM WHYR-LP Baton Rouge Community Radio. You are listening to Louisiana All American Sports. We'd like to remind you that in about 15 minutes we have coming up on WHYR, we have Noel Jackson with Music Satisfaction here on WHYR. He is coming up very shortly. Always a fantastic show, so please stay tuned. So, now we move on. Still technically at summertime, so of course we have an update on our boys for summer in this week's MLB report. So let's talk about the big matchups. We have a couple of big ones this weekend. the one that's going down, and Perry, you're might be the one saying I told you so at the end of September, because the Oakland Athletics and Los Angeles Angels are going at it. They're playing a 4-game series. It's been a very Angels favorite series. The Athletics shot themselves in the foot Thursday night, got mollywopped last night, so the Angels cannot lose that series. Today, Jeff Samardzija of the Athletics takes the hill against Kobe Rasmus of the Angels. That's at 8 o'clock our time. Excuse me. The Miami Marlins are still hanging on by that little cliff, trying to claw into that second wild card spot. They're playing the Atlanta Braves. Pierre Cozart against Aaron Harang. That game's at 6 o'clock our time. Cincinnati and Pittsburgh will be going at it. Pittsburgh has Andrew McCutchen back in the lineup, and Vance Worley will be taking the hill for the Pirates. Perry,
the Pirates are 3 games back. The Brewers are hanging on to the lead in the Central. The Cardinals are a game and a half back in that division. And speaking of the Cardinals, we have our report live from St. Louis, our field reporter, Brian. Hey, Brian, fill us in on what's going on in today's game in St. Louis.
Hi, guys. Good afternoon to you. Starting in a little over an hour, the Cubs and the Cardinals will play Game 2 in the series between the historic rivals. Pitching for the Cubs is Felix DeBrunt, a 6'2", 225-pound left-hander with a 2-4 record and a 6.07 ERA. Recently acquired Justin Masterson, right-handed pitcher for the Cardinals. He's 6'6", 250 pounds with a record of 2.22 and a 7.43 ERA.
Ooh. Wow. So it sounds like there's going to be a lot of runs scored today. Hey, Brian, man, I've got to ask you this. In what position in the lineup is the African-American batting for the Cardinals today?
Actually, Perry, I got good news for you today on that. The African-American player batting the lineup for the St. Louis Cardinals today, leading off, is Michael Brown.
And, of course, we've been keeping you updated on that story in Ferguson, giving you a lot of that. And, let's just hope for peace and justice and a resolution to that very, very tragic story. But Michael Brown, the Cardinals are very big in the whole St. Louis community, including the African-American community. And Michael Brown, let's not forget that there was a tragedy that befell this proud community, this proud baseball community. So, Brian, thank you for the update. Cubs and Cardinals, it's a part of a doubleheader. There's also the second part of that doubleheader will be at 7:15 Central Time. Cardinals kind of got caught with their pants down last night. That young guy Jorge, he's a Cuban player from Chicago. He's looking Yashiel Puig-ish as they pull off a little upset. So Cards got to get ready to rock. Perry did mention the Milwaukee Brewers. That's a big series against San Francisco. San Francisco, by the way, had a record that was set as Yusmeiro Petit, relief pitcher, broke the major league record for consecutive batters retired with 46 consecutive batters last Thursday against the against the Colorado Rockies is where he wrapped it up. That broke Mark Burley's record set in 2009 off the heels of Burley's perfect game. Ironically, the streak was broken up by the pitcher for the Colorado Rockies. Jordan Lyles had a double after they stopped the game and held the ball and had an ovation for the gentleman. And finally, last big series, Washington Nationals, who are on fire, will play at Seattle at 8 o'clock tonight.
Hey, the Nationals are 6 games up on the Braves in that Eastern Division. The Dodgers are 3.5 games up over the Giants in the NL West. In the AL West, we have the Angels over the Athletics by 3 games. In the AL Central, the Royals are up just a half a game over the Tigers.
Incredible.
And in the AL East, the Orioles still running away with it, although the Yankees are making a late surge. The Yankees are 7 games out. Professor.
Yes, sir.
Let's do your thing.
Let's do it.
Freedom is a road seldom traveled by the multitude. Public enemy number one. Show what you got.
Oh yeah, class is in session, boys and girls.
Oh my goodness!
It's Professor.
I love the Public Enemy.
That brought back a couple of memories, man.
Eric, wow, indeed.
Shoot, Professor Johnson's history class is in session. Brrring.
Indeed. First of all, I want to shout out the Panther Pops, who is a group of strong gentlemen who are working expeditiously to help transition the new principal, Mr. Herman Brister at McKinley. And they're working there to try to mentor the youth and just be of assistance to him. So strong shout out to those gentlemen who are taking time out of their busy schedules to assist the community. What I want to talk about today briefly, and I've been told by Perry to utilize some brevity in reference to my history lesson. Sometimes I have a tendency to be long-winded, but we'll try to...
Oh, you're not the only one. I think you might have caught that from me.
So we're going to try to exercise.
It has nothing to do with the importance of it.
Indeed.
I heard that.
Indeed. Well, today I want to address, as I said, I like to try to bridge the gap and fill in obscure historical facts that are unknown by the masses. I want to talk about, I try to transition from local to world history to try to just keep it interesting. But 40,000 to 60,000 years ago, there was a group of Africans that migrated from northern Africa, and they are called the Grimaldi. And the reasons why they're called the Grimaldis, the remains of their civilization and skeletal remains were found in Grimaldi, France. This is a small town located in southern France. And the carbon dating shows that these migrants were, of course, from Africa, and these are some of the early European descendants. Now, I am a firm proponent of Glauber's law, and as well as the Ice Age theories. Glauber's law dictates that endothermics that live closest to the equator will have a scientific tendency to be darker and be more melanated. Sure. The further you are away from the equator, farther north, farther in colder areas, you will be less melanated and have that particular phenotype. The Ice Age theorem, for those who may not know, there were 3 Ice Age theorems, but the one that affects the Grimaldi was the Würm glaciation period. This Ice Age lasted for about 15,000 years, which encapsulated the vast circumference of Europe and entrapped these people in an ice age. They were devoid of sun and so on and so forth. So this is a theory or a theorem, which scholars in history often allude to when it makes reference to the early descendants of Europe. Shout out also to Dr. Okoye Amos, who I always make reference to. He's working fervently to complete a documentary, which he asked me to participate in. But the brother has done extensive travels. He's gone to India. He's gone to Kemet, Egypt, and done historical and empirical evidence, found empirical evidence that will hopefully tie in a lot of these things. And he's a firm proponent of Glauber's law as well. So the Grimaldi are the remains of these skeletal remains of some Africans, which are the early ancestors of some of the first Europeans. In fact, there's also evidence that initially the early Roman culture and the Greek culture as well, they had the phenotype of the blonde hair and blue eyes, but there was a lot of interracial or biracial, which but there wasn't a term.
Right. It's what we would call biracial today.
Right, exactly. What we would call biracial today, there was that biracial phenotype. So there's one human family. We're all interwoven together.
God's children.
Indeed. But just to fill in the historical gaps, I wanted to point out the importance, the significance, the historical significance of the Grimaldi. This was 40,000 to 60,000 years ago, the Grimaldi.
That all sounds like a bunch of liberal media mumbo jumbo. Everyone knows the world's only 6,000 years old. All that carbon testing. No, I'm teasing. Right. That's just a little shout out to my friends at Fox News.
Right. Wow.
Anyway, I once again, I always get a little smarter after the professor's history class. That actually filled in some stuff I did not know.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. Well, that's awesome, man. Hey, as we're winding down, man, I've got to give a big props out to a couple of former guests to Louisiana All American Sports radio show that will play in their initial collegiate career games today. And first we've got T.V. Williams from the University of Kentucky.
Oh, good for him.
Yes, he will play in his first game today as a collegiate, as well as Nick Ruffin from the University of Auburn. Both were former guests of our show.
Right. Well, hey, good luck to TV and good luck to Mr. Ruffin. Huh?
No, I just said Nick Ruffin.
And good luck to Mr. Ruffin. They both seem like obviously I met I met Anthony, so I mean he's a great kid, and Mr. Ruffin seemed like a really, really sharp young man. So we got 3 more to Gio here on Louisiana All American Sports. Are there any parting shots that we want to get out today?
Yes, Eric. Let me chime in since this is community radio. We want to acknowledge those individuals that are doing positive things in the community. I want to give a shout out to Reverend Dale Flowers at New Sunlight Baptist Church. He orchestrated a scholarship drive for those individuals and the youth of his church. He actually had a symposium, if you will, of individuals to come in to help the youth, to try to assist them with the astronomical expenses of college. So shout out to Reverend Flowers and the New St. John community. They did a great work. He's also an alumnus of the illustrious McKinley Senior High School as well. So he's doing great work, and he's also with the Panther Pops, and I promised him that I would mention that.
All right, super awesome. So as we're rounding down to the end of our journey, as we always say around this time,
ADT, JNS, love you.
Have a good afternoon.
Peace.
Hail to the King and Lords of Lords. May He protect us from the evil. Hail to the King, Lords of Lords. May He protect us from evil.